officer have came back in this building and checked on nobody in over 3 hours. We have an inmate here that is dead, been hanging right here for the past 2 hours.
What's going on, y'all? Eric Moser here with Code Red Conversations, where we discuss all things related to policing, the criminal justice system in general, and how you can be your own first responder. In today's video, we're going to be discussing a recent video shot from footage gained or attained by or from an inmate in the Georgia correctional system. But check out the insane, crazy conditions that are taking place inside the Georgia Department of Corrections. Wild, y'all.
Cell phone video shot inside a Georgia prison provides a stark example of how few officers are actually on the job these days.
The video shows a dead prisoner slumped over a cell block railing while others complain he's been there for hours, all because no officer is on duty in their section of the prison. Fox 5 I-Team reporter Randy Travis investigated the video and the disturbing number of job vacancies in Georgia Department of Corrections. Randy?
That's right, Russ and Courtney. The Department of Corrections knows it has a problem attracting and keeping employees. They've raised pay, held job fairs across the state, but in some prisons like this one, records show they have only a third of the staff they need.
I would say that almost every prison or correctional setting has issue when it comes to staffing. That has pretty much always been a universal issue. Being a corrections officer is not a luxurious job. And it's not made for everyone. Not everyone can walk into a jail or a prison and work in that environment. You have to be cut out for it. So let me tell you that right out the gate. The South has notoriously been known to pay low. And then you couple that also with a current environment that's very anti-police and anti-law enforcement, anti-authority. I can only imagine how difficult it is to find people to staff those jails, those prisons.
As you can see, it is Sunday, July 3rd at 8:17 a.m.
This anonymous prisoner recorded multiple videos of a gruesome scene at Ware State Prison. We'll let him tell it.
No officer have came back in this building and checked on nobody in over 3 hours. We have an inmate here that is dead, been hanging right here for the past 2 hours.
Now, if what he's saying is true, they blurred out the video. So on this top aisle, if you can see, they blurred out the area. There's supposedly an inmate who's dead, hanging over the edge, and no one has come by, no staff has come by in 3 hours. If these claims are legitimate, you have someone who's dead, and Lord knows what other mayhem and other mischief that they've already gotten into. So I don't know what's going on there, but that system, the staff, whoever's running the show, they better get it together. There are a lot of things that you can do to minimize if you have a staffing issue. If you have to lock people down, then you lock people down so that you don't just have utter chaos, and then you let out a small group of people at a time. But even then, you still have to have people addressing their issues. What if someone gets sick in their cell? What if there's a fight? You have a two-man cell or multi-man cell, there's a fight and someone gets injured. If no one's there to attend to their needs, and yes, their needs need to be attended to, not everybody in there is a freaking serial killer or an absolute murderer. They still are human beings and they still need their needs attended to. And if no one's coming by for extended periods of time, man, I'd hate to be in charge. I'd hate to be whoever's in charge.
At least 2.5 hours dead.
We've blurred the image of 54-year-old John Eckers serving life with parole for murder. His body was balanced on the railing of the second level, arms dangling down. A Department of Corrections spokesman says staff arrived 18 minutes after this video was recorded.
Dead. It's crazy.
Now, I don't think it'd be too difficult a stretch to believe that he was probably murdered by another inmate. That's just my guess. I could be totally off. He could have had a medical incident. Kind of weird to be slumped over on a upper tier, but just my thoughts.
It's crazy.
Investigators determined foul play is not suspected, but that's not the biggest question here.
Why couldn't you guys have alerted the staff earlier?
How couldn't when no one is in the booth?
when no one is around.
One of Ecker's fellow dorm members agreed to talk to us from his bunk as long as we did not show his face.
I'm still tripping over the fact that my man got a cell phone. And if you have any familiarity with those housing units, when you're in a jail or in a corrections environment, you start to get to know your inmates. And anybody who's worked in that section, I'm pretty sure they already know who this guy is. And I'm assuming they got his cell phone at the very least.
Is the Georgia prison system a more dangerous system now than in the past because of staffing?
Well, of course it is. Of course it is.
Let's go. Georgia's prison system is already under federal investigation. The U.S. Justice Department building its case, starting with lawsuits filed by the Southern Center for Human Rights.
You have many facilities across the state running staffing vacancy rates that are close to 70%, so you really only have one officer in a situation where you need 3.
According to records Christina Remlin and her staff collected, Ware had a 68% job vacancy rate in January.
Dang.
The DOJ investigators actually paid a visit to Ware days before Ecker's body would be left hanging over a railing for hours.
I can't imagine a more dramatic illustration of the total crisis of violence and chaos inside of our prison systems.
The Department of Corrections turned down our request to interview Commissioner Timothy Ward. In a written
I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked that they ain't trying to be interviewed right now.
statement, a spokesperson said, "We remain committed to ensuring the safety of both staff and offenders, and we continually evaluate any need for improvement in our processes."
I think the Department of Correction is trying to manipulate the free world to saying that it's not a problem.
Before he finished his sentence last year on drug charges, Andrew Richardson said he was stabbed by a fellow inmate multiple times.
And I was bleeding out in 3 ways, like the cartoon, the water coming out the cartoon, just bleeding, 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 bleeding. I'm passing out. He want an officer 100 foot away from me. No help.
He said the lack of officers made life more dangerous than when he first went to prison nearly 20 years ago. And for anyone who doesn't care about what happens to inmates, if a federal investigation determines civil rights violations, Georgia taxpayers could be on the hook for a lot of money.
Now, I know the average response would be, well, you know, they're inmates, they got themselves locked up, you know, who cares? I can understand that to some extent, but at the same time, they're human beings. And as a believer, once again, I see these individuals not discounting many of their heinous acts and not trying to say that they don't need to be where they are. I'm all about a strong, firm criminal justice system. But at the same time, with all the years I spent working in that environment, I understand the necessity and need for rehabilitation. And before we get there, understanding that they are image bearers, they're fellow image bearers of God. Based on that aspect alone, they should be afforded some level of dignity and respect. So it doesn't mean we live in Thunderdome, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. We just throw people in there, or Gladiator days where they just fight to the death. No, we're actually human beings. And there should be some civility in the way we treat those individuals who are locked up, especially knowing that the majority of them will ultimately get out. We don't want to have an environment where we are just making better criminals. We don't want that environment. I think the criminal justice system, in particularly the correctional system, needs to focus more on that correction. Discipline should not be absent from that. I think it is an integral part of the entire system. And we can't miss out on that. But at the same time, we should treat them as human beings. Just food for thought.
I accepted my punishment. I took it. Now it's time for the Department of Correction to take their wrongdoing and to fix this.
They seem to be trying.
By joining the Georgia Department of Corrections, you become part of something.
Recruiters fan out across the state nearly every week. Entry-level pay is now more than $18 an hour. But in this economy, job seekers can likely find similar pay without the downside.
The job is a very, very traumatizing one, and in this context right now, there's a lot of chaos and a lot of violence, and it's understandable why people don't want to work there.
I got to tell you, this is an unusual interview, talking to an inmate from inside a prison. Why did you feel so strongly that you wanted to talk to me?
Well, because the people that need to get the proper attention are dying that don't need to be dying. If they have the proper, staffing, people will get the attention that they need.
The Department of Corrections is not confirming that Ecker's body was there for as long as those inmates insist it was. They say it's still under investigation.
Yeah, well, the inmate who spoke to you on the phone makes a good point. You've done stories in the past about the cell phone problem inside prisons. I mean, it seems absurd that it's so easy for them to have access to phones.
Yeah, and officers have tried for, you said, for years and years to stop the incessant flow of cell phones into the prison system. But, it's interesting, ironically, without that cell phone, there wouldn't be proof of that inmate hanging over the railing for as long as he apparently was. So, it provides some evidence for the Department of Corrections, for the, the Justice Department that's currently looking at the state of Georgia's prison system. A lot of eyes are on the prison system right now here in Georgia, and there are a lot of talk about what to do if they can't get enough staff, some perhaps radical ideas like reducing the number of prisoners through early release and things like that. Not to the point yet where it's going to be implemented, but they're talking about it right now. So
I knew ultimately that would be part of the conversation. Back to the cell phone issue, obviously there's some staff members who are bringing it in. That's, or maybe during visitation, maybe some family members. But the most likely reason they're having an issue with cell phones is because there's some staff who are being paid or who might have some gang association or something along those lines, or who've been manipulated and they're bringing in cell phones and Lord knows what else. That is another thing that has historically infiltrated the prison system, is the number of staff members who get compromised for various reasons, for whatever reason. But in this situation, it points out a major problem. But I knew ultimately, going back on the initial point I was going to make here, I knew ultimately that they would be talking about reducing the number of inmates, because that's pretty much going on nationwide. The talk about reduction of inmates. One of the many reasons why we have such a major crime spike happening all over the country, and particularly in a lot of these liberal and progressive cities. Make sure you check out this video right here. I think it'll have some additional content that you'll find very helpful. In the meantime, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation.